So much, Sierra, and welcome everyone to what will be a fantastic webinar. I just want to provide a few welcoming remarks and context setting before I introduce our wonderful moderator. So about today's session, you will learn in today's webinar about the two-gen approach and how it's not only powerful, but also just makes sense as a greater return on investment for all parties involved when we focus on families holistically. If you've ever worked with children or parents or any part of a family unit, you know that to help one group is also to influence another. So it only makes sense to do so in an intentional, coordinated effort. Here at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, the two-gen approach aligns with our mission to disrupt the generational cycle of poverty by improving the prospects for early school success for children growing up in economically challenged, fragile, and otherwise marginalized families. We know that to realize this mission, we must see, honor, and work with a family unit holistically so that children's caregivers are supported every step of the way and have their own opportunities to thrive. In a landmark 2012 report on the two-gen approach titled Two Generations, One Future, Ascend at the Aspen Institute stated that two-generation approaches can be applied to programs, policies, systems, and research. And you will hear in today's conversation examples of how these leaders are applying a two-generation approach in these different ways to support children and adults better together. There's a greater recognition of the need to think about and design supports and opportunities for children and families together in a two-gen approach. And today's conversation, we're excited to highlight the important role that housing developments, including housing authorities and affordable housing, can play in these efforts. You'll learn about 4 different initiatives that are applying this two-gen approach and using housing as a platform to provide supports and opportunities to help children and families thrive together across both rural and urban areas in different places around the country. And we're thrilled to be joined today by Sarah Haight, Director of Two-Gen Practice with Ascend at the Aspen Institute, whom I will introduce in a moment. Sarah and her team at Aspen have been leading exciting and critical field building work to advance a two-gen approach and related policies and practices, including through their network. They have helped to familiarize the concept of two-gen to policymakers and practitioners, and have contributed publications and led convenings that continue to advance our collective understanding and preparedness about the power of a two-gen approach. So we're so excited that Sarah is with us today to represent Ascend and to serve as our moderator. So I'd like to now officially introduce Sarah as our moderator. So Sarah Haight is the Director of Two-Gen Practice at Ascend at the Aspen Institute, which is a catalyst and convener for diverse leaders working across systems and sectors to build intergenerational family prosperity and well-being by intentionally focusing on children and the adults in their lives together. Ascend believes in the power of co-creation, and in her role, Sarah directs the Ascend Network, a community of more than 540 organizations implementing two-gen approaches. Sarah also manages large-scale convenings for the two-gen field, such as the Aspen Think Exchange and Aspen Forum on Children and Families, and manages Ascend's portfolio of resources and strategies for practitioners applying a two-gen lens. She's a licensed social worker in Maryland and DC, and previously worked as a clinician focused on maternal mental health in New York City. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you so much for joining today's conversation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mary, for that lovely introduction. And I have to say, it's so energizing to see the breadth and depth of participants in the chat from Kansas to New Mexico to Florida, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania. It's really powerful. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about two-gen approaches and specifically do so in partnership with housing leaders. So before we dive into the conversation with our panelists, I'd like to share a bit about the two-gen approach and its impact. Ascend's founder, Ann Mosley, often says, Ascend's North Star is better outcomes for families, and the two-gen approach is a powerful mechanism for getting there. And we've learned a lot in our 10 plus years as a policy program of the Aspen Institute, but I know many of you are eager to hear from our speakers, so I'm going to try and keep the next few slides fairly short. Next slide, please. So at their heart, two-gen approaches recognize whole family units as families define themselves, to consider the variety of pathways for promoting positive, pragmatic, and effective outcomes for everyone. We work with families as experts and meaningfully engage parents and caregivers in designing policies and programs that affect them in order to develop holistic, integrated, and equity-focused solutions. So this family-centered lens helps to immediately identify whole families' needs and goals to inform the integrations and alignments to the programs that serve them, which then maximizes long-term impact for families and communities. And as we talk today, I'd encourage each of you to think about how and where you serve one member of a family and where you can collaborate or shift your work to ensure you're moving more towards that center you see on the slide so that the whole family is flourishing. Next slide, please. I think it's really important to note that Ascend did not invent the two-generation approach. The two-gen approach recognizes family as fundamental to human development, and this intuitive link between individual and collective success has long been recognized by Indigenous communities, both in the US and around the globe. But supporting entire family units really wasn't employed as a formal federal strategy until the early development of the human services sector in the late 19th century. I also want to note that the term two-gen was coined in the late 1980s by the Foundation for Child Development to reflect programs that were emerging across the country. Two-gen approaches continued to gain traction throughout the early 2000s and then reemerged in around 2010. In 2012, in partnership with a group of philanthropic organizations, Ascend at the Aspen Institute launched and published the Two Generations, One Future report that'll be dropped in the chat. And that laid the groundwork for the growth and development of the two-gen field's expansion. Then, with a decade of accomplishments and learnings from our network of partners, a number of whom are on this webinar, and our fellows, we released State of the Field, Two-Generation Approaches to Family Wellbeing. And that outlines 9 recommendations for organizations like many of yours. So that report is also going in the chat. Next slide, please. I think it's important to also note that the two-generation or two-gen approach has been and continues to be referred to by many names within and across the field. Whole family, intergenerational, ohana nui, multi-gen, these all encompass the same fundamental principles. Two-gen approaches reflect and embrace the diverse shapes, sizes, and structures of families to ensure all family members can reach their full potential. Next slide. So there's significant data to support two-gen approaches, and advances in brain science have demonstrated that caregivers' brains change in new parenthood just as babies' brains do. We also have a greater understanding of the return on investment in quality early childhood, and we now have recognition that the best predictor of a family's overall economic well-being is the parent's educational attainment. So these illustrative data points you see on your screen right now have spurred more leaders across the country to embrace these approaches. But historically, our systems, in part due to real structural barriers, have too often given one family member a balloon and the other a dead weight. So these data points, and again, they're illustrative. We have more on the Ascend website if you're interested in learning about how to support the reasoning for these approaches in your own work. These underscore why it's so important to create services and systems that ensure children and the adults or caregivers in their lives are on a path to prosperity together. So my last slide is an overview of the key components of the two-gen approach. I think we all know that well-being is a multifaceted process and it's a lifelong pursuit. And our systems and our structures need to do a better job of catching up with that reality. An individual's or a family's well-being just isn't a sole endeavor, and financial, social, mental, and spiritual health depends on a person and family's context, the resources and opportunities available to them, and the support of others. So two-gen approaches have a robust vision to improve conditions for families by coordinating equitable access to the systems and structures necessary for us to thrive. Ultimately, these approaches recognize 6 key components that you see on your screen here to improve families' financial stability, social capital, healthcare, and quality education. While historically we've identified housing within the economic assets component, we also know that it's inextricably tied to health, access to education, access to supports and connections that help us all flourish. So the critical role of housing in families' lives and the opportunities to use place as a platform for supporting families is what we're really here for today. I hope that overview is helpful. And when we get to the Q&A portion of this conversation, I'm happy to respond to questions as well. But with that, I'm really excited to introduce our panelists who are going to go much more in depth on how they're applying this lens within their own organizations. So I'm going to introduce our presenters next, and then we'll dive into an initial question for all of them. So first up, we have the fantastic Dr. Aisha Nyandoro. She is the founding CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which is a nonprofit that uses a radically resident-driven approach to end generational poverty. In 2018, she created the Magnolia Mothers Trust, which is now the country's longest-running guaranteed income program. Aisha is focused on shifting gendered and racialized narratives around poverty and deservedness and working to shift national policies. Her expertise on economic, racial, and gender justice issues is regularly featured in outlets like the Washington Post and CNN. She's a TED speaker, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge she is also a longtime Ascend Fellow. We're also super lucky to have Liz Marsh with us today. So Aisha is in Jackson, Mississippi. We're heading north in this next introduction to Maine, Bangor Housing, where Liz Marsh is the Director of Resident Services. Liz has been with Bangor Housing since 2015 when she was hired as the FSS Program Manager. And in that role, Liz helped families overcome barriers to work and supported their efforts to improve their financial stability and build assets. In 2017, Liz helped develop a two-generation program at Bangor Housing called Moving Families Forward. And Moving Families Forward expanded the services available to Bangor Housing residents to include childcare assistance, parenting classes, mental health counseling, and literacy support. And in 2019, Liz became the Director of Resident Services at Bangor Housing. Super excited to hear more about that work. Now we're going to zoom out west and hear from shortly Ariana Thornton West, who is community advocate at Tacoma Housing in Tacoma, Washington. Ariana serves residents in several of THA's West portfolio properties by assisting with urgent and resource needs, as well as through the 2Gen program. In the 2Gen program, she works with families to accomplish their goals, connect with local resources, engage in SEL activities, and participate in community and property events. And she provides family-centered coaching. Her joy is continually renewed in this role as she gets a front row seat to the resiliency, determination, and successes of the families she serves. And now I'm also delighted to introduce two of our speakers from West Virginia. First, Donna Hoylman-Peduto. She is the Executive Director of the West Virginia Public Education Collaborative. Donna is part of this work as a nonpartisan collaborative of state and national leaders committed to championing public education through outreach and innovation. And prior to this role, she actually served as Director of Operations for the West Virginia Board of Education. And earlier in her career, she had multiple roles with the Department of Ed, the Stupski Foundation, and Ed Venture Group. She also started as a classroom teacher. Similarly, Melanie Cutright, who is the coordinator of early learning for Wood County Schools, West Virginia, has a background in education. She earned her bachelor's in education from Glenville State and a master's in education leadership studies from West Virginia University and has completed 35 years in public education. She has been a junior high librarian, an English teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal over the years, and she is now coordinating the early learning for Wood County Schools. So we're super fortunate to have such diverse wisdom joining us today. And I'm going to start with something to ground us all in what really brings your heart and your mind to this work. So what compelled you to work in housing for those of our panelists who work in housing, and what compelled you to work in education with regards to Donna and Melanie? And Aisha, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you for the question. And so Springboard to Opportunities is a resident service provider. I always tell, and we work directly with families that live in federally subsidized affordable housing, and we are based here in Jackson, Mississippi. And thank you for the slides. I'm going to answer Sarah's questions first, and then I'll go to my slides. And so I always tell people that we are resident services, but we're resident services plus, 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 because we do so much more than just serve as a connector between access to programs and services and activities in families that live in affordable housing. So when I think about what led me to the opportunity to work into the space of affordable housing, I really do feel that I was quite fortunate that I had the opportunity that, quite frankly, just landed in my lap. I was never trying to work in the space of affordable housing, but we had an opportunity over 11 years ago to start Springboard Opportunities. And when we started the organization, it really was with a very basic understanding of how do we center the needs of families that are living in federally subsidized affordable housing into the equation of change? How do we support them as they actualize their dreams in life, school, and work? So that's what brought me to this work, and that's what continues to keep me in this work. And with that, I'll go to my presentation. Thank you. Next slide. So Springboard, our motto really is quite simple. We believe that we are where hope and opportunity meets. We provide supports designed to help low-income families find access to services that foster positive outcomes. We call our approach radically resident-driven, and what that means to us is that we center the needs of the residents in all of our planning, implementation, delivery, and evaluation of community programming and services. There is nothing that happens in the affordable housing communities in which we operate in which families have not said is something that they need, an opportunity that they want as they work to advance themselves in life, school, and work. Next slide, please. So the way we work is across 5 strategies, and I apologize that the writing is so small, but you all will have access to this, but it was a lot that I was trying to get on one slide. But we have 5 strategies in which we operate in, and we just went through our strategic planning process last year. So these are our 5 new strategies that will be guiding our work for the next 3 years. And first and foremost is our resident relationships. We truly do believe that nothing happens within community unless you have the benefit of being in relationship with the families that live within those spaces. And so what that means is that you actually have to spend time getting to know the dreams and challenges of the families in which you're charged to work with. So many people want to skip over this process, but over this part and go right into the programming and activities. But the investing in relationships is the most important part of what it is that we do. And quite frankly, it is my most fun part of my job. I love the fact that I am regularly invited to baby showers and birthday parties and barbecues and different things that our families are doing. Those are investments in relationships. And without those relationships, trust does not exist. And without trust existing, you're not really able to provide the services and opportunities necessary for families to actualize their dreams. Another part of how we operate is our socioeconomic well-being. In 2018, we became one of the first organization in this country to lead a modern guaranteed income program, the Magnolia Mothers Trust. This program is still running to this date. It's the longest running guaranteed income program in the country. It provides $1,000 a month to mothers living in to the mothers that we work with living in affordable housing. But we also take a 2-gen approach in all of the work that we do, and we provide 529 accounts for their kids as well. Since we started this work in 2018, we have invested financially in over 500 mothers, providing them with a guaranteed income, as well as investing in 529 accounts in for their kids. But not only have we invested directly in the women that we work with, we also have become a national leader in the fight for a guaranteed income and better cash-based policies within this country. There are over 150 guaranteed income programs right now being implemented within this country. Many are done in affordable housing communities, many are done within other communities, centering the needs on families with limited financial opportunities. In addition to our guaranteed income programs, we also do emergency cash disbursements. We know that the reality is that when you are living in poverty, life is expensive. We have families that are constantly finding themselves under the backdrop of having financial emergencies, whether or not it's a water crisis that we have from time to time here in Jackson, or a climate crisis that they do not have the financial resources to meet. So we provide economic support in those ways as well. And we also have lending circles that we are really building that trust across community, where individuals are able to build lending circles within their community and begin to understand what it looks like to foster support locally. Another piece of our work work is fellowships. I am a strong believer in community leadership, and I believe that leadership does not happen in a vacuum, that you actually have to invest in strong leaders. As Sarah said, I'm a proud Ascend Fellow. I've been a fellow for over 10 years. The investments in my leadership by Ascend and the Aspen Institute have a lot to do with the leader that I am today. So we have fellowships where we're investing in the leadership of the women and their kids that we work with. We have fellowships across education, where we really are making sure that our mothers understand how the educational system works at the local, state, and federal level. We have policy and change systems fellowship, and then we also have workforce fellowships, and we also have a youth advocacy fellowship as well. We do policy and advocacy, understanding that a lot of the challenges that our families faces are not individual challenges. They are challenges in which systems need to be reformed. And the best way that you go about reforming systems is by changing the narrative. And the only way that you can change the narrative is by changing the narrator. So really empowering our families to be the author of their own narratives and making sure that people understand the complexities of living in poverty, the complexities of living in affordable housing, and the complexities of trying to navigate these various systems. And that relates to our narrative change work as well. For the last 5 years, we've had various opportunities for the families that we work with to share their narratives, whether or not it's through our night of storytelling that we do annually, whether or not it's participating in documentaries or interviews or book opportunities. All of these pieces allow our families to center themselves into the conversations. So where they are telling their narrative and that their narrative is not being told for them. Next slide, please. So how we work, folks are always like, oh, how do you do all of those pieces? The way we work is quite simple. Everything starts with a conversation. And that means that we have annual conversations, focus groups within the communities that we operate in. We truly do believe in having feedback loops and feedback circles. I have staff on the ground whose entire role is to serve as an advocate for the families within those communities. After we have our conversations, we have what we call a community blueprint. And the community blueprint is the annual activities, program, services that will be offered in that community for that year based on what residents said were important for them. Once we have that blueprint, we have a community proposal, and this is where we take it back to residents and we say, okay, this is what we heard, did we get it right? And this is where we have some back and forth conversation, because sometimes we may have felt that we heard families say, okay, we need more youth activities, where in actuality, they were saying, no, we need more educational activities. Youth activities and educational activities aren't always the same. And so we really go back and forth, making sure that we are refining the proposal. And then from there, we have our actual programs. And that's where we provide the programs within the strategies that I just discussed within each of the communities that we operate in. We know that no communities are similar and they're not monoliths, even though we're talking about communities with high incidence of poverty. We don't go in treating them all the same. And so we really do pride ourselves on the fact that how our programs look in the various communities differ based on the demographics and the realities of the individuals that make up that community. And so thank you all for the opportunity to share how we approach our work in housing and how we truly do believe that by centering the needs of families into the conversation of change, we can create more equitable outcomes, which will benefit all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. And I just have to share, we've worked with Springboard to Opportunities for a number of years now, as Aisha noted. And 2 years ago, we were in Aspen, Colorado for a large convening of a range of policymakers. And a parent, a mother from Magnolia Mothers Trust, joined us there, Sequoia Coleman. And someone asked her to share findings or outcomes from Magnolia Mothers Trust. And Sequoia stood up and said, that she was able to host the first birthday party she had been able to have for her child. And it was more powerful than any data point she could have shared. And it was such a great example of the kind of narration change that Aisha is speaking to, that those stories really are great examples of how hard it is to quantify change, but also how powerful putting that agency back into the hands of parents, what differences it can make for both generations, child and parent. So thank you, Aisha. Next, we are going to hear from Ariana with the Tacoma Housing Authority. Ariana, I know you have some slides to talk about how you do your 2Gen work, and I'd love for you to kick off by just sharing briefly what compelled you to work in housing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It was a bit of a happy accident. I spent about the last 10 years working in government programs, social work and social work adjacent programs, and primarily in workforce development. And as I grew in my career and really honed in on how I like to serve and serve families and really moving towards that 2Gen or multi-generational approach, found a phenomenal opportunity with Tacoma Housing Authority as a community advocate, and got to segue myself into that. But definitely didn't start out with that intention of getting into this work. I actually when I went to college, I graduated with an English lit major. So you really never know where life is going to take you.
Same, actually. So we can compare notes later, but thank you for sharing that, and would love for you to dive into the work you're doing at THA and to pull up your slides.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. And then, yep, intro. So we can go to the next slide. So this is just a bit of a snapshot, and you can actually find this on the Tacoma Housing website. So really the program in a very basic form is an intention to serve our families in our portfolio with wraparound services, doing family goal setting, really emphasizing those social emotional supports for all members of the household with some very specific programming, typically for our youth. We offer tutoring to them on property through our community partners, as well as other, sports and social emotional activities. And we do have a bit of financial incentives. Nothing huge, just a little financial reward for doing what families are already striving to do. Because as was mentioned, poverty is expensive. So anytime that we can help get some additional funds into the hands of our families, we absolutely like to do that. And within this program, not always, but very often our families will graduate our 2Gen program and then move into the FSS Family Self-Sufficiency Program, which is kind of, I like to view it as like a step up for goals as families continue to work together to improve and really reach that family self-sufficiency. Next slide. This will be familiar to most of us in the work, but the 2Gen ecosystem in how we serve and support families is huge. It extends so much more beyond, our staff and the program and our traditional partners. When we're serving families, there are so many folks that are involved, and not always, other folks or agencies that we see. But within our work at Tacoma Housing Authority, our community advocates or 2Gen coaches work directly with the families. We have an amazing set of community builders who really work to build new relationships and bring in the programming that families are asking for. We also have a really involved just organization and leadership team that really helps, push the envelope on what we can do, looks for additional forms of funding or creative ways to braid funding so that we can continue to offer better services and meet the needs that our families are expressing to us. And then, it's more than just the family involved in the family that we serve. They, of course, are our focus, but they often have extended family, their friends, their neighbors, because we're starting from this place of housing. Our property management is having, communication with the family and our clients. Maintenance is there. And then, of course, school district, our programming partners, other resource partners. Folks involved in the employment and education space. And then, of course, there are usually other organizations, advocates, caseworkers who are connected to our families and also supporting them. So not that we will always touch on all of these things, but I always think it's important to remember that we are a small piece in supporting a family, and there are a lot of different avenues for resources and support and involvement, as we serve them and really try to help meet the needs that they're expressing to us. Next slide. So within the 2Gen program, it's obviously more complicated than this, or can be. But three kind of main areas that I like to chunk it out into are enrollment, participation, and then graduation. So enrollment, and we've really tried to simplify this process for our folks and make it a conversation with the most minimal amount of required paperwork. Because I don't think I won't say anyone, very few people like paperwork. And we definitely don't want to create barriers or obstacles for a family. So when a family decides that they are ready for the 2-gen program, that's something they want to do. We'll do a really basic intake with them, release of information, W-9 for those financial incentives. And then we do a wheel of life assessment to kind of get a scope of just where they're at in life, and really just using it more of like a conversational tool that sets the platform for them to do their goal setting. With our financial incentives, there's a handful of goals that have that financial incentive attached, but they can create any and every goal that they want to. When I'm working with families, I would say we set an average of 7 to 12 goals that we work on over the course of a few months, maybe up to a year. But they decide those, they set the pace on those, and we change them. Life changes. So if they need to adjust those goals, or, remove one, and maybe not even add one in its place, that's great. It's their program and we're here to support them. Even though enrollment is where the 2-gen program starts, that relationship building, which I'll echo this many times because it's a great point, is so, so important, and where everything stems from. So when I'm enrolling a family, I have started that relationship very often. I've started that relationship process with them, much before that, to kind of build that trust and get them comfortable before we enter into that kind of supportive relationship. Once families are in the program, we're in that participation phase. That looks really differently for every family, but it's a lot of regular support and check-ins with the whole family, not just the head of household or your main point of contact. We help with resources, referrals for their needs and wants, and clients really drive this process. So that means they determine everything from the goals to the check-in frequency, the method that we check in, the types of activities that they want to do for their goal attainment. And then again, those goal changes and adjustments to their program as they go. And we really encourage them, and we have a great organization leadership team that encourages this as well, to give constant and continuous feedback about the program, about what we're offering, about how they're feeling like they're supported, about the larger ecosystem of housing, because it's such important, critical information. And that client perspective and insight should always inform the work that we're doing. And if they're willing to trust us with that and share it, it's absolutely something that we should use to make what we're doing better. And then once families have completed their goals, then we graduate. And actually, just a few weeks ago, we did our very first graduation ceremony, which included all of our 2-gen families and FSS families that had graduated or completed their program within the last year. And it was beautiful. We did a catered dinner. We brought them out to, catered dinner, brought them out. It was decorated beautifully. Their whole families came. Some clients came up and spoke, they got certificates, and it was just a really beautiful and joyous thing to see families celebrated that way. And while that's wonderful, when our families graduate, the support doesn't end when their goals do. So whether they choose to go into FSS, family self-sufficiency, after their 2-gen program or not, that support that we offer to them, that connection, that network that they've built, that remains regardless if they're active in the program or not. We're still a part of their support network there. Next slide. So just a couple of strategies and best practices for recruitment and enrollment. Presence, and I really can't state this one enough. If you have the opportunity, right, to be where your families are, be present, be that familiar face, even if it's just walking by and saying hi. That presence and being someone who they know will show up and is active and involved in their community goes a long way into building those trusting relationships. Also really meeting them where they're at. So being flexible in the process, and how you communicate, whether that's adjusting your paperwork, if you can, if they, want to do a text instead of an email, whatever flexibility that you can create within how you operate and within your program, really offering that to clients to meet them where they're at, and to the entire family. And then really utilizing and leveraging your team and partners. So keeping in really good touch with your team, cross-department collaborators, your program partners, the tenants, really everyone. One, they're a great referral source to get other folks into the program, and to share what a benefit that can be. And it really just helps, again, kind of build that trust. A lot of the families that I've worked with, it's not because I told them about the program, it's because their property manager, who they have a trusting relationship, told them, or because their neighbor across the way told them about the program. And then dealing in complete transparency always. I don't think, and this might be a hot take because a lot of us work in government programs, but I don't think anything we ever do should be a secret. I don't think how it works should be a secret, and what can be potentially available to clients or how we can change things should ever be a secret. I think how we work together with families needs to be an incredibly transparent process. Next slide. And then I think this is my last one here. Just a few notes on our strategies and best practices on engaging folks in the program. So, and some of this might sound a bit repetitive, and I'm sure we'll hear more of it today because it's so important, but clients really driving at every turn. So beyond deciding on their goals, changing them, adjusting them, choosing how to pursue them, deciding how they want to do it. Like they need to drive always, because it's their program and we're here to serve them. And I truly believe that they are the experts in their own lives. And we need to reaffirm that in how we support them in programs. And getting everyone involved, it can be really easy to default to that main point of contact for the family that you're working with, but really making that active effort. So, if you're meeting with a household and it's, usually one member of the family is there, you find ways to get in touch with the rest of the family, whether it's a phone call, stopping by some of their community events, maybe attending some of the youth programming that the kids are going to, and really building that relationship across the household. And then a reminder that to coach, right, and not to manage. I think very often when we're in programs, we can get a little too program managing, and forget that coaching piece of it. It's really I don't know. That's just been like a core tenet of my work, and something that our team does incredibly well is to focus on the coaching of the client and of the family, and not managing a program. The program is there to offer structure and support and strategy, but we are there to coach and support the family. And then building trust at every opportunity. So checking in with our families. I don't call and go like, hey, did you complete that goal yet? Not unless they're specifically asking for that level of intense accountability. But just checking in, being a real person and caring, asking how their grandma's birthday was, or how, checking with the kids and asking how that big school report that they were nervous about went, but building like a real true relationship. And that really helps, create the kind of, space to where you can have that supportive accountability, and authentic trust building. And then I think the next one is just a thank you. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Ariana. And I know that there are some questions coming in the chat, but I want to move us along, and we will get to some of those questions. Move us along to West Virginia, so that we can hear from Donna and Melanie and the work you all are doing in partnership, really from an education standpoint. So Donna and Melanie, you're up.
Thank you so much. And I've certainly learned and enjoyed my colleagues' presentation. Just to tell you why I got into education very briefly, I had a lot of teachers on the way up and a grandmother that told me not to be a teacher, but to value literacy. And if I mastered and valued literacy, then my life would be magical. And then that kind of just leads you right to teaching, at least in my case.
That's a wonderful way of putting it.
So I'm anxious to tell you about something we're doing with literacy at the West Virginia Public Education Collaborative, and so glad that Melanie's here, boots on the ground. If we could start with our slide. Okay, great. It's called Sparking Early Literacy Growth in West Virginia. Next slide. This is an ongoing partnership between the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation and the WVPEC. And I know Benedum is a big part of the campaign, and she might have even been the one that put a bug in your ear that we were doing this work. Our program is aimed at soliciting innovative and transformative ideas, initiatives, and interventions to support early literacy in children from West Virginia from birth to age 8, especially in high-need schools and student population. And this is something that Benedum has been promoting for many years, really decades that I've been teaching. They've always been a supporter of early literacy, and particularly in those populations. So we thank them so much for the support. Our projects receive up to $50,000 for implementation and education from the Benedum. And then we've also had additional projects supported by Steely Foundation, EQT, and Greater Kanawha Foundation, all in West Virginia. Next slide, please. This is a little bit about our model, how we started. We started in June 2020, and it was really exciting to be able to have a planning grant. And we developed an RFP and a resource guide, and we brought on people on the team that were just amazing from West Virginia University Literacy Department, and we call them our consultants, and I'll talk a little bit about them later. The next year we had our implementation phase 1. We had 9 new projects, and that was very exciting, and really we'll talk about some of the projects coming up. But something called COVID happened, and so we were a little delayed. So in phase 2, Benedum was kind enough to let these phase 1 projects continue what they were doing with renewal grants so that they could complete what they're doing and do the evaluation. And they also funded 8 new projects. So that was a big year for us and very productive and just wonderful implementation. Then in phase 3, which is where we're at now, we are funding 5 new projects and 3 expansion grants. And the expansion grants were the brainchild of Melanie Claxton, our program officer at Benedum. She saw so many promising practices that were arising from phase 1 and phase 2 that she said, wouldn't it be great if there's other schools that would like to do that? I have that seed of an idea and expand it and make their own, and then they could work together. So that's what we're doing now. And I think somebody who's in the audience here, Canyon Lonas, who's with the PEC, is leading that wonderfully. And then in 2024, we plan to do a lot of outreach, presentations, white paper. We really want to affect state and local policy, make recommendations that would be worthwhile so that others can do that. Next slide, please. Now our grant is open to public and private schools, early care, early childhood centers, after school, summer learning, nonprofit, college. I can't imagine what group would be turned down from applying as long as they're literacy focused, and community and public organizations are a large part of that. And this is, just so wonderful that we're speaking with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, because our projects from the beginning are required to align with that. And your focus on school readiness, high quality instruction, and/or extended learning. The projects have to take place in West Virginia, to focus on West Virginia children, as I said, birth to age 8, and we're prioritizing that high needs population and/or communities. Next slide, please. Our projects are required to have 2 measurable outcomes. One has to be tied to student growth, and they can select the other one. The new thing that we've been doing the last couple years that really fits into everything we've been hearing already from the other initiatives are we're required to form collaborative partnerships. You know, if it's a school, they have to have a collaborative, meaningful partnership in order to apply. And the projects are encouraged not only to try out new initiatives related to literacy for students, but learning opportunities are encouraged to include teachers, families, and other stakeholders. Next slide. Okay, we really are going to focus on Melanie Cutright, who's coming soon in Wood County, because that ties to the 2-gen approach with the housing. But luckily, we have some other projects that I just want to skim over briefly to tell you about. One of them is the Grand Family Mentoring Program that's in collaboration with WVU Extension Office, and it focuses on students in kinship care. And the families are matched with a mentor that provides virtual literacy tutoring to the students, and then mentorship to the grandparents that are raising young children. And we all know that that's, you know, really widespread. And it's really neat because the mentors continue to work with the students throughout the project, and that ensures consistency and prevents a summer slide. And we provide families with a device and an internet hotspot if they need it, which most of them have. So that's a great project. Next slide. Born to Achieve, I Can Read, WVU Medicine. I think this is so unique. This is, you know, one of the many favorites I have. At WVU, our pediatric medicine residents are helping students with a program that's called Reach Out and Read Training, and it shows physicians how to facilitate conversation when the children come in for their visits with their, you know, they talk to the parents about the value of books and reading. And when they come in for their well-being appointments, if they would like to have them tested, that's optional. But the really neat thing is the physicians write a prescription for reading. And then, as you can see in the picture, they have access to a book vending machine that they can go to for free and pick out something. And we're currently expanding it in the WIC offices throughout West Virginia. And that's one that gets a lot of attention, that project. Next, please. Okay, Forging Foundations for Families, Hardy County Schools. So now I'm going to say another favorite. So they're all my favorite, I guess you would say. This is really unique because literacy workshops are held for parents right during the work time at their place of employment. And education leaders, and in this case, the leaders are from the county school system, they work with a major employer. And this is based in Hardy County with the Pilgrim Chicken Factory. And the employer allows them to have release time to attend workshops during their lunch hour. So basically, they're getting paid while they're having the training. And it's often focusing on ESL families, which is a great target for us. Next slide. Now comes to the one that has to do with housing, and I'll let Melanie Cutright take over from them, and really want to congratulate her for being, you know, the key reason this went so well. Melanie?
Donna, thank you very much. And thank you for your support and Canyons, as well as the Benedict Foundation. I had the opportunity to apply for one of the summer reading grants through this, and our program was called Summer Sparks. We focused on students who were leaving pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. We focused on literacy and high quality teaching and social emotional learning for students and families. Just a word as to how I ended up where I am and doing this kind of work. I grew up in a tiny little village in West Virginia, where pretty much we all knew each other. And there was a lot of stability as far as family stability, community stability, and definitely available work and housing. So I kind of grew up behind a white picket fence and planned to stay there. I knew from the time I was in first grade that I would be a teacher. Um, and I was going to go back and teach in schools like I had attended because that was comfortable and familiar. But God had a different idea and placed me in a school that was the most challenging junior high school in our district. And I had never experienced life in the way that my students experienced life. They had parents who really struggled, grandparents who really struggled. Housing was insecure. Just pretty much everything in their lives was insecure. And that entirely changed my view on life and education. And I learned to love working with those kids and their families. And now I am in a position as coordinator of early learning. So I work particularly with students pre-K through third grade, focusing mostly on pre-K. But in the summer, I expand to work with other grades. So I wrote a grant so that we could work with people whose kids were struggling. And I went into the schools and did some training. You can see in this slide, this is training at one of the schools. We had parents there. I did trainings at 2 other schools. One of the other schools, we had the children with the parents in the training. The day this picture was taken, the kids really wanted to go outside and play at recess instead of being with their parents. Another school that I worked with had actually, it would have been 2 and 3 gen families coming to the training that I did. And we were able to provide them with food and a variety of other things. The school that I ended up focusing on for the summer school program is near the Parkersburg Housing Authority. And so we have worked with the Housing Authority before to do some outreach in that area, to actually go down to the neighborhood and do like a registration fair there. My hope was to do parent training at the Housing Authority. We ended up with a shorter program. So I did not get that done this year, but I'm working on that for May and June. We're looking at going to the Housing Authority, partnering with the local school there and the guidance counselor there to work with parents and doing some training and focusing on basic literacy skills. We have a program that we use called Haggerty, which is phonemic awareness based, and we've seen tremendous growth in our children, even in pre-K. In that, we also want to work with some social emotional learning for students and families. And you'll see the little guy in the middle of the page there. If you wonder what he has holding behind his head, that's a koala bear, and it's actually a weighted stuffed animal. And we use those with our kids who have had trauma or who just have sensory integration issues. Our community has a almost the highest in the nation incidence of opioid addiction. And so we have lots of residual effects from that. So this little guy was someone who benefited from those weighted animals, as did other students. And as we worked with them, we saw 30% growth in reading in the kindergarten to first grade students and 40% growth in reading in the first grade to second grade students. Typically, what we see is what we call in education the summer slide. They leave at a reading level in June, and when they come back in August, they have lost sometimes 2 or 3 months of reading progress. So these students, 30% and 40% not only didn't lose, but they actually gained in their reading. And we did this right before the school year started, which I think is an excellent time. So we're going to continue our work with working with parents, providing them some books as a result of this grant, and also talking some about social emotional strategies that they can use with their children. And we're working again, as I said, with the Parkersburg Housing Authority and the school counselor at the neighboring elementary school
That's
to
terrific.
to try to meet people where they are.
Thank you, Melanie. And I'm sorry to jump in. I want to make sure we celebrate, first of all, that 30% and 40% improvement is really impressive, and would love to make sure if there's anything you didn't get to, we can tackle that in the Q&A. But move to Bangor, Maine, so that we can hear a little bit more about Bangor Housing's 2-gen approach, and then we'll have a short conversation and go to Q&A. So Liz, we'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I love hearing about all the innovative programs that exist and all of the work you guys are doing. To start off by talking about what brought me to working in housing, similar to what other people said, that was not really a goal that I set out to do. I came after working in social work, and I was going to school to get my master's, and had worked in the child protective field for 10 years before coming to housing. And I think an opportunity presented itself at Bangor Housing for the Family Self-Sufficiency program that I was attracted to for many reasons. I wanted to have more of a proactive kind of involvement with families rather than reactive. And of course, was drawn to the idea of being able to help families. And now that I'm here, I know that I will never leave. I've been at Bangor Housing since 2015, and I just I love the challenges. I love the rewards that come with the work. And so I'm going to introduce you to our Moving Families Forward program. I have a video that explains a little bit.
In 2017, the Boys and Girls Club and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program at Bangor Housing joined together with a goal of improving outcomes across whole families, aligning opportunities that would help families to pursue their goals, remove barriers, and build our organization's capacity to impact lives.
This included building a robust network of community partners, training our staff to take a family-centered approach, and initiating a variety of classes, workshops, and other activities through which participants could access financial coaching, career development, childcare, mental health services, and more. This is how Families Forward began.
I meet with families monthly, and I help them get connected to a lot of resources that they might not know about.
It's been easier to get daycares, lots of answers with that. Honestly, if I have any questions, I'm able to call and get information.
Families Forward has also helped me get main care and food stamps. I was really struggling filling out that paperwork, and now I get food stamps, and now me and my kids have main care.
I learned a lot of new parenting skills that I didn't know before because I'm a single mom with 4 boys.
We're in the program to save towards a house. We've taken a budgeting class through the Families Forward, and we've also taken a home ownership class. So I think that we're meeting the small milestones towards building our credit and doing those to get to the bigger goal.
Our target populations had been parents and children separately, and now we were talking about our participants being families.
It's just really helped bring us together as a family. We talk instead of scream at each other now.
We learned a lot more about how to maybe communicate a little bit more healthy.
We consider how we can simultaneously help young people in a way that supports their own development while working to enhance the efforts of their parents and caregivers.
Our financial situation has gone immensely better, and it's largely in part to the Families Forward program. You know, this kid's my world, and making sure that I could help her through a program was like, okay, well, I'm interested.
We began asking what the families needed from us.
The cooking classes helped me to save money and be able to have meals packed ahead, which I never knew how to do that before.
Back when my son was a freshman and he wanted to play football, but I couldn't afford his gear, there was funds available for that.
I support our Families Forward participants and families by listening to their wants, their goals, their dreams.
My goals for the future is to continue going to school and eventually get my PhD in social work.
I would love to go back to school and eventually have my own practice. I would like to be a clinical psychologist.
Hopefully plan on finishing college. I had to stop due to COVID, but plan on going back in the spring semester.
And it's more than just a financial support, kind of guidance.
I kind of like the big picture of looking at the different things you need to achieve those goals and checking in regularly.
In addition to helping parents get the training they need to get a better job, we assist them with accessing early education and childcare for their young children so they can feel confident knowing their children are in a safe, nurturing environment while they work.
The club could provide both peace of mind to the parents in terms of safety, but also influence long-term, life-changing outcomes for youth.
The staff make me feel very happy and safe. They're always protecting us and leading us.
It's not like any other job where I'm just showing up to work. I'm showing up to create a difference, and it really helps to know that.
We want this to be like a second home for them.
I hope to watch the quiet kids speak up, the sad kids smile, and the teens become leaders.
He started out at the club in 3rd or 4th grade and worked his way up. He went from a club member to a LIT to a junior counselor, and now he works here.
It became more and more important to recognize that what happens in one generation affects the other. When children do well, their parents can succeed and vice versa.
At the Boys and Girls Club of Bangor, we believe that every kid has what it takes. The mission and core beliefs of the Boys and Girls Club fuel our commitment to promoting safe, positive, inclusive environments for all our members.
That is probably our biggest blessing when we moved here.
What I've learned at Boys and Girls Club is you can help each other, and it's important to learn from your mistakes.
With this in mind, both Family Self-Sufficiency and Boys and Girls Club, together as Families Forward, intentionally create spaces that allow both children and adults to build social connections, develop a love of learning and growing, and exploring new things, while providing the coaching, mentors, and support needed to set challenging goals, stay on track, believe in themselves, and celebrate their success and accomplishments.
Until eventually, we are looking at a college graduate, a homeowner, a new parent, and then an all-new generation of dreamers and doers.
So I think that video explained a lot of what we do. I think what's unique about our program is that we are the blending of two organizations, Bangor Housing and specifically the FSS program, and then the Boys and Girls Club. We came together back in 2017 because we recognized that while we were working with the same families, a lot of our families overlap because the Boys and Girls Club is located at Bangor Housing. It was difficult for the children to succeed if their parents were struggling or didn't have the supports they needed, and vice versa. It just made sense for us to get together and work simultaneously with the whole families. And we actually had the opportunity to participate in family-centered coaching training and visited Tacoma Housing when we were first exploring different 2-gen programming. Our program is designed to put families on the path to a better future. We are working to limit the adverse effects of poverty on future outcomes and by providing families with the knowledge, resources, and supports needed to pursue education or employment goals, build financial capacity, and achieve positive social and emotional outcomes. Our goals for children are that they participate in quality experiences such as childcare and after-school and summer programming. Parents have the opportunities to learn, work, and build savings, and families grow their support system and build social capital. And one of the things I wanted to say is that I grew up in Bangor Housing, and so I think one of the reasons I was also drawn to the work is that I knew the challenges firsthand, and the stigma that was attached to living in housing, and Interestingly, my twin sister is the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Bangor. She also grew up in Bangor housing. And I just felt like we had a really good sense of what it was like to have those missed opportunities. What we're providing for the children in our community is not really any different than the opportunities that are provided to children that don't live in housing. It's just our kids don't have the access to it. And so we're kind of meeting that need and those missed opportunities. And I just wanted to also add that we have a robust network of stakeholders and community partners, and that's how we do a lot of the work that we do. We connect families with parents with trained coaches who help them problem solve immediate issues and set goals for the future. And our partners help parents to build capacity, expand employment and education opportunities, bolster child development, promote educational and positive social emotional outcomes. Parents can access financial coaching, career development, post-secondary education, tutoring and literacy assistance, childcare and early childhood education. We have mental health services. We have just a number of services that we're very proud of being able to partner with, community partners to do. And I did have a couple of outcomes that I just wanted to share. In the past 3 years, we've served over 211 families. We've served 211 families, sorry, and 92 households have increased their annual income, and the average increase in annual household income was $20,507. 54 of those households experienced a reduction in cash welfare assistance, and 39 ceased receiving cash welfare assistance as a result of their increased household income. And I just point that out because I think that really brings attention to why this is so important, that we take this whole family approach when we're working with families. I don't think we would be experiencing these types of outcomes otherwise.
Thank you so much, Liz, and really appreciate you bringing some of your own personal story into this. That is really powerful. We have about 20 minutes left for this conversation, and there are some more questions coming in through the chat. I hope everything you've heard is giving you a sense of the breadth and depth of different types of ways to apply a 2-gen lens to housing programs or housing adjacent programs from a 2-gen standpoint. At Ascend, we have a set of 5 principles that really serve as a roadmap for implementation. So if you think of 2-gen approaches as the what, the guiding principles are the how. I'm not going to go through each of these principles right now in the interest of time, but I would like to take just a couple minutes before we go to Q&A and ask a few of our panelists to share how some of these principles show up in their work. So Aisha, I'd actually love to start with you here. We haven't heard your voice in the conversation in a little bit. And if you wouldn't mind just sharing how Springboard applied this principle of listening to the voices of families and recommendations of families to inform some of the policy priorities you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Sarah. So listening to the voices and recommendations of families is at the forefront of everything that we do as an organization. Like I said, our tagline is radically resident driven. So the policy recommendations that we have for this year, specifically as it relates to temporary assistance for needy families, the earned income tax credit, and how we go about providing SNAP assistance. And all of those were really designated because our families are indicated those are some of the most significant barriers that they have to achieving economic prosperity for their families. So how do we make sure that we're including them in those conversations, but not only including them in those conversations, making sure that they have the support, resources, expertise necessary to, quite frankly, lead those conversations. We have had families that we work with not only testify here at the Capitol in Mississippi, but we've had families actually be on calls with the White House as it relates to how legislation and policy should be laid out in a way that actually will benefit families the most.
That's really powerful. And I know just even the genesis of Magnolia Mothers Trust was really a result of listening to families and following through on that. So thank you.
Exactly. The genesis of Springboard itself was about
Yeah.
was listening to families and following through on that. So everything about this organization, it's always been listening to families, making sure that we're responsive to that, and always making sure that we just don't listen once. We are constantly listening and going back and engaging, including them in the process.
Yeah, that follow through piece you mentioned is just as, if not more important than the listening piece. Thank you. Briefly, Liz, can we go back to you, because the new Opportunity Center at Bangor Housing that you talked about was really, in part developed through this process of listening to the voices of families. How did the perspectives of families you serve inform what you designed there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could hear if some of the parents in the video speak about the importance of participating in programs that are going to benefit both generations, themselves and their children. We have a number of families that have lots of barriers, such as lack of childcare, lack of transportation. If you offer something and you offer something simultaneously for their children, our families are more likely to engage. They've told us that. If you want us to come, provide childcare, do something for our kids. Additionally, a lot of our families were experiencing, the need to increase their income, but the lack of knowledge on how to do that. They didn't even know what they wanted to do for work, what opportunities were available for them. And so we created what we call the Industry Exploration Academy in partnership with our local community college and workforce development partners. And our participants are going through and touring employers and learning about the different industries and the educational pathways to get there and what's available to them. All of these opportunities, we were somewhat limited because of our lack of space, and we decided to convert our admin building into an opportunity center based on the voices that we were hearing in the community. They said it in the video, how they want more classes, they want more opportunities to learn. We definitely have partners that are willing to come to Bangor Housing and offer those types of classes. And like I said, we just have space. So the Opportunity Center is going to be a shared, combined space with Resident Services and the Boys and Girls Club of Bangor. So anytime that we offer a community college class, a financial literacy workshop, there will always be something offered for the children as well.
That's great. Thank you. So last question for three other panelists before we go to the Q&A in the chat. We've heard so much about your successes and what works, and I often feel that we learn as much from what's not working or what didn't work as we do from what has worked. So I'd love to start with Ariana, and just if you could briefly share what has been a big challenge or a barrier specifically to partnership because of how crucial partnership is to this work, and how did you address it?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges that can come up for folks is not always so much a lack of interest from partners, but sometimes funding, right? Because that's how it works. So funding can be a limitation. And then which has presented some cool opportunities for residents to do some resident-led activities and programming. And then always adjusting with the changing needs. People get older, family moves out, they move in. So just being very agile in developing new partnerships so that the ones that we have in place continue to be active and appropriate. And then just doing that continued work of alignment and strengthening relationships, specifically like with school districts, right? Like in working with the school district, there can be a huge variance in individual schools in their level of engagement and partnership. So just really, strengthening those relationships as well, because it's a really important partnership when working with our youth and our families.
Yeah, trust building and relationship building is sort of the foundation for so much of this work. Donna and Melanie, any specific challenge you want to share with the group and how you addressed it?
I'll start off. I think when I was looking at your principles, the principles listed there, those were really good. And the one that struck me is foster evidence and innovation together. And that's been a little bit of a challenge because, when you're trying to get innovative, bold ideas, sometimes it's hard to collect that outcome, like I said, that we required, which is, increasing student growth. You know, for instance, the pediatricians in the project I told you about, they're not so used to collecting educational data to show that kind of thing. And then when you partner with communities like we like to do and all the different organizations, you know, they don't have maybe access like schools do to the data. So that's been a bit of a challenge. And, you know, just kind of recognizing that innovation shows growth in different ways, not always the student data. And luckily our Benedum Foundation believes that too. So, Melanie, you probably have better ideas.
No, I would say, you know, some challenges are, I think, building those relationships in the community. I completely agree with Aisha that relationships are absolutely critical. And that's one thing that I'm changing in what we're working on as far as with parents, the school, the housing authority, the school counselor. I know I did some preliminary work with some data collection with parents, and I assumed that they would probably like a QR code to do my survey. And what I found out was several people actually preferred the paper survey instead of the QR code. It's a tiny little thing, but I had both there and I was glad of that because my assumption was incorrect. And so I think building those relationships with people and getting trust is critically important. And so I want to work on partnering more with those parents and building a relationship with them so that when we are in the community or in the school, we have a more trusting relationship, because I think that's when community is formed and real change can occur and we can all learn from it.
Really appreciate that, Melanie. And Don, I just want to underscore what you shared about fostering evidence and innovation together. I will be candid and say, I think of all 5 principles, that is the one that long-term can be most challenging for organizations because of what you described. And I want to give a shout out to someone who's on the webinar, Monica Barzak, who for many years led the innovation lab at CAP Tulsa, which has been a leader in the 2Gen field. Monica is now an independent consultant on these very issues. But we have some reports on our website that I'll share with Campaign for Grade Level Reading that talk about how organizations like CAP Tulsa did that work of balancing innovation and evidence building, recognizing that funding partnerships are really dependent on both being evidence informed and being forward thinking. So I want to go to the Q&A in the chat now, and I'm actually going to start. I know Larry had to depart, but actually I suspect his question is one that some others have. So Aisha, would love to just start with you. Can you share if you've been able to disaggregate the effect of guaranteed basic income on specific outcomes for families?
Yes, and all of this, you know, we have been assessing and evaluating our program for the last 5 years, and all of our reports can be found on our website at www.springboard2.org, T as in Tom, O as in Oprah.org, because we really do believe in sharing that information. But we have been able to show that guaranteed income, just providing families cash without restrictions, eliminate so many of the barriers that families have. We have seen families being able to get out of debt, move into home ownership. We have seen them actually feel as if they are better parents because they can actually say yes to some of their kids' needs, not just their kids' wants. We have seen them be able to get, like I said, out of debt. So many times we think about families that live in poverty as having credit card debt. It's not credit card debt, it's predatory debt. So we've seen families, you know, pay off the hospital bills, pay off the for-profit schools, get out of payday lenders. So we see all of that happen time and time again. But the biggest piece that we have been able to see are those pieces that a lot of us take for granted. Is what Sarah was saying earlier, the ability to go on vacation for the first time. I remember our very first year, one of our moms, Tia, had not seen her father in over 15 years. Her kids had never met their grandfather. They had a relationship with him through FaceTime. And the grandfather lived in Philadelphia. It's not as if he lived in another country, but no one ever had the disposable income in order to make that journey from Mississippi to Philadelphia. So that year, during spring break, she got her car repaired and she put her kids in the car and she drove to Philadelphia for her kids to meet their grandfather for the first time. And it's those pieces that a lot of us, like I said, we take for granted and we feel as though it doesn't matter, but those pieces matter. It's building the community, it's building the connection, it's showing you that you do have agency, you are allowed to have dreams. And so we are able to disaggregate from time and time again how having access to a guaranteed income is better than a voucher or a subsidy or any of the other benefits that our families have. And it's all because they say it's cash and they can do whatever they want to with it. I remember one time one of our moms saying, I may not be hungry, so I don't always need SNAP. I appreciate it, but I may not be hungry. I may have other needs that I need to address for myself and my family.
Thanks for sharing that. And for those of you on the webinar who aren't as familiar with Springboard, I would encourage you to go to the resources that Mary's been putting in the chat, because I think, as you've probably heard from Aisha, Springboard has done a beautiful job of really modeling how data and storytelling are important to move the needle on practices and policies, that we need both. And some of the stories that Aisha has just shared are examples of that. So we love to direct people to some of the materials that are on their website when you're looking to figure out how to tell some of those stories rooted in the data that we know also moves policymakers and funders. I want to go to a question from Heather, which it looks like Liz is typing an answer to, but I think I'm going to expand the question a little bit. Heather's asking, do you have someone in the role of navigator and or as the point person for collaboration? And I think this is relevant for a few folks. Liz, it looks like you responded to it or are, but can you speak to just how you approach collaboration and who holds the accountability for it? Because I think that's often a really big challenge. And then maybe Ariana, if you could speak to that as well, because that list of partners on your ecosystem slide was significant. And I would imagine that has also required some work. So Liz, can you take that? And then I'll go to Ariana.
Yeah, so I didn't type a response because you brought up the question, but we don't have somebody in that role. I think a lot of times that naturally falls on me. I reach out to partners when families and coaches together are identifying needs or barriers. It has been challenging for one reason. I think there's a lot of, like I said, stigma out there around people that live in public housing. And recently even we've heard that lack of motivation, I feel like it's what they're interpreting as a lack of motivation is just a lack of our families knowing how to navigate resources. So our coaches take on the role sort of helping our families navigate resources, and I take on the role of educating partners on, what is true and what is not, and how we can best work together.
Ariana, what about you in terms of that list of ecosystem partners and that level of coordination?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge, and it comes a lot of different ways. On the coordination side of things, we do have a couple of wonderful community builders on staff, one for our east side, one for our west side, who really work to develop those relationships and identify programming based off of what our families are asking for. And then we have a phenomenal program manager who really reinforces that and builds additional partnerships. So they get to be kind of housed there, but Tacoma Housing Authority really works to be agile, flexible, and adaptable because the work is ever changing and the needs are always changing. So our partnerships come from a lot of different ways. So us as community advocates, we sometimes bring in partners, and then to coordinate it at a level, we'll direct them to our community builders and program manager. And then same for our families. They are tapped into great resources that we are sometimes unaware of, or great potential partners. So we really empower them to bring forward that information and then do the follow-up work to make sure that they get connected to our program manager and or community builders to actually formalize that relationship and bring in that partnership or programming.
Thanks for sharing that. And what I'm hearing too is that you all are doing a lot of hard work to reduce the administrative burden on families, right? That when there are a lot of partners at the table, that can sometimes mean families have to go through way more hoops, and that requires a lot more bandwidth. It can be very taxing. And so I think an important theme here for folks is that because the nature of two-gen approaches is highly collaborative, there is also an important focus on alignment and trying to keep things as clear and smooth for families from an entry point standpoint as possible. So thanks for sharing that. We have just 2 or 3 minutes left, and actually a question came in anonymously that I want to direct to Melanie. And Melanie, this question is really around school districts, which is such an important part of this work. What do you hope the district learns from your work and success, and does to deepen and sustain this work, specifically with housing partnerships?
I think that's a very good question. I have a friend who actually grew up in the housing project where I tried to partner with, and she felt very stigmatized. She has become a teacher in our school system, is extremely successful, extremely intelligent, but I know that was a big deal to her as she was growing up. I think it's important for schools to reach out to different entities in the community. I work with Birth to Three, I work with WIC, I work with family resource networks, different agencies in the community. And I think it's important to do that, to have a presence in the community, particularly in places where people feel uncomfortable with the school system. They may have had negative experiences as students, and they may have had negative experiences with their children. I think it's critical that as the school system, we work to have positive relationships with people, to build that community with them. And I think it's important for that leadership to come from the top down and be supported from the bottom up as well. I just think that's vitally important.
Thanks for that. And I think, Melanie, you also point out something really relevant to the rest of this work, which is that there needs to be a range of buy-in early on, that if this is just a leadership initiative, it's not sustainable. And that also takes trust building and relationship building. So I'm going to turn it back over to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. But first, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to our panelists who have been doing really transformative work for families and are doing it every day. I'm deeply inspired by your commitment to this work. And I also just wanted to underscore something I noted at the beginning, which is that the two-gen terminology is imperfect, right? And in many instances, communities should define for themselves what the framework should be, that the North Star is better outcomes for families, and a multi-generational whole family or two-gen approach is a powerful mechanism for getting there. So thank you so much. And Mary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and all of our amazing panelists today. I hope you are encouraged by all the amazing comments you got in the chat about how helpful and inspiring your remarks were today. So, and Sarah, thank you so much for your masterful moderating as well. So if we can pull up the slides about our upcoming sessions, I just want to give you a quick preview so you can go ahead and sign up for these when you can. So we have a great session next week at the same time we had this one, Tuesday, March 26th, 3 p.m. Eastern, looking at teacher licensure and ensuring quality and equity in that through assessing assessments. Should be a great conversation. Moving into April, the following Tuesday, we're going to look at, this is a series around kindergarten readiness and kindergarten matters, starting strong, developing foundational life skills in kindergarten. So for those of you interested in the earlier side of education, that will be a great webinar to attend. And then the following Tuesday, April 9th, our Crucible of Practice Salon, TBD. We'll keep you posted on the topic of that. We are formulating some great speakers now, but save that date and time. And then finally, I'm excited to be organizing this webinar coming up on Tuesday, April 9th at 3 Eastern around looking at the recent results of the Education Recovery Scorecard, which looks at how school districts across the country have been doing in the past year, looking at the results and some implications and how we can learn from that to improve our work in our own districts as well. So just a huge thank you again to Sarah and all of our amazing panelists for the conversation today. I know everyone got a lot of great information from that and an equally important inspiration. And so thank you all so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.